Welcome everybody to our weekly webinar on where to put a practice. And I'm going to be honest with you, a lot of times we do some very good things. Other times we do some really, really important things. Today is going to be a really important thing because we're going to talk about essentially micropolitan areas. These are locations that are going to be just the right size for you to put in a startup practice. And let me just kind of give you the foundational reason why I propose this topic. A micropolitan area is one that has between about 15,000 and, I don't know, 25,000, well, up to 50,000, let's put it at that. And they're always over the threshold of what it takes to have a dental practice or a veterinary practice or a chiropractic. See, here's the thing. When you have a population that is just too small, it is not possible for you to really have a successful practice in one location. You can have scattered satellites and second offices around the area, but you can't really make a go of it cost effectively unless you have at least a threshold of about 15,000. Now, a dental practice in the United States will usually require between 2,000 and 2,500 patients to have a full-time office. That is a general, the thing can go a little higher, can go a little lower, but for the most part, that's kind of the sweet spot. If you have a community that doesn't have at least the bottom line threshold, and I'm going to put that at 15,000, then if somebody else comes into town, only one of the offices can survive. And that is a problem. So it is not a bad thing for a professional practice to have competitors, because it also means that it's sufficient gravity or weight within the area to be able to support multiple offices and to make it a place for a full-time healthcare professional practice site. So if you start out with 15,000, there are some other factors that are going to be important, and let me get into those in just a second. But the reason we're doing this particular session is to say, where should you be able to start up? Other quick thing, if you don't have that and somebody else comes in, they're going to push you out of the market. We don't want that. Let me go ahead and share my screen. And host, you've disabled my ability to share my screen. Can you fix that?
Hold on.
Everybody, the chickpea. It's neither a chick nor a pea. Discuss. I'm sorry. That's what we do when we need to eat up a little time. Are we good yet?
All right, now try.
Okay. Oh, now we're in business.
So that one time, Scott, you can blame that one on me.
Really? That was the one time I can share.
The one time in the year and a half, 2 years that we've done this.
Wow. You're a bitter young man. You know that? No sense of kindness to the elderly. All right. Now, where should you put a practice? We're going to talk about micropolitan areas. Ultimately, the frontiers of founding a new practice are identified in what this is. So let's talk about it. You're going to have between 10,000 and 50,000 residents. My preference is to start at the base of 15,000. However, by its definition, a micropolitan area is one that has at least 10,000, goes up to 50. It usually is an independent city. In other words, it's got a governance that is not dependent upon a city in some other location. It's usually, however, within about a 45-minute drive of a city. It will always have a growing population. So that's kind of by definition what makes a micropolitan area what it is. And it also has a second characteristic I love, which is a growing employment base. So the area is healthy economically in terms of its demography. And it also, by the way that these are being identified now and ranked, and there are more than 500 of them, is by the quality of life. Very often they have good shopping and good tourism. When I say tourism, you see bright young people these days are wanting to go someplace that they don't feel like they're so far away from anything to do. And that's why micropolitan areas are ranking based upon those factors. Now, I just want to give you 7 quick guidelines on how to work in an area. if you're going to do a startup, and we're going to go through some very specific top 10 or more locations for you to consider. I've got to warn you though, if you delay, someone else is going to grab them up, because as soon as there are 2 or 3 new practices that have gone into these areas, game over, you got to look for someplace else. That's the issue about being small, but also growing. You're going to find there will be some competition. The other fact though, just to say this real quickly, they're not going to be a place that you're going to find practices for sale typically, because they are usually not growing sufficiently that they have a base population that's already in practices. Now, the other fact you got to keep in mind is you really want to live within the community that we're talking about. You can't live far away. You've got to be in that place, because part of the issue of being in a micropolitan area is you're part of the culture of the site. I want you to consider yourself to be part of the town. There are lots of people who have the idea that, oh, I want to have 25 practice locations. And they want to do this like they're on strings far away. Guys, that is not the way to do this for these kinds of locations. By the way, incidentally, if you go into these, they're going to be generally profitable, so you got to move quickly. Now, number 4, they appeal to the young. Usually young families are the ones who are moving in. Usually these micropolitan areas are not places that retirees move to. They're usually younger, and they're industry and employment driven. Number 5, don't be afraid to be independent. And I mean by this, these places are usually not particularly good for corporate type practices. They want you, I mean, the people in the town want you to be independent. They want you to be vital. They want you to be interesting as the people who are moving in here are. And you've got to do something that's a little different from everybody else. High tech is what has usually created the momentum for these places to come along in the first place. You've got to be involved in the communications process as well. Meaning, you start off with good signage. You make sure you have a good interactive website. You have got to start hitting the ground running, even if it may not appear that it's a very big community. It's going to become bigger, and that's what makes a micropolitan area what it is. And the other thing is, number 7, guys, if you do not have a practice viability report done to determine how likely this place is going to fit what you're trying to do, you're making a huge mistake. Now, my personal recommendation is to do a marketing report, not just a practice viability report, because by the time you have found one of these, you've got to move on quickly, and that almost implies you've got to do marketing right away. Now, let's talk about which ones these are. And by the way, I'm almost reluctant to bring them up. Every time I do this, and I bring up micropolitan areas, they're going to fill up really soon. So someone's going to be mad at me and say, wait a second, there's already people there. That's going to happen. Don't dawdle if you're interested. Number 1 is Pecos, Texas. Pecos has only got about 15,000 people. Fits that lower threshold. But oh my gosh, it's growing cats like gangbusters. We're noting, particularly in Pecos, by the way, that it's driven by employment. It is in West Texas, and a lot of people like East Texas because it's a greater population density closer to Louisiana. But West Texas, kind of wide open spaces, but I'm going to tell you, Pecos is where things are growing. Summit Pass, Utah is the entry community to get you into Park City. It's up in the mountains, world-class skiing, very well-educated people, and has one of the highest per capita incomes in the United States. But even higher than Summit Pass, Utah is Jackson, Wyoming. Now, I was kind of ambivalent on Jackson for a very long time until some very large employers moved in a very small town. Median household income per capita is about $150,000. So Jackson's had always been considered kind of a weird herald location. Trust me, it's doing great. Heber, Utah, for those of you who are in Utah, no, it's not that far away from Provo and Orem through Provo Canyon. Property values are low. It is just down the hill from Park City. A quality of life that is just kind of exceptional and a very, very family-friendly place to go. Don't look at the site as any of these and say, there's already dentists or physicians or other people there. There are going to be. But because of the rate of growth, you say, it's worth the risk. Bozeman, Montana is another one of those places. Now, Bozeman happens to be the home of the photonics and optics industry in the United States. Small town, high tech, software development in Bozeman is going crazy. I recommended against Bozeman for a long time. Numbers have changed in the last 2 years. Haley, Idaho is number 6. Now, Haley, if you know, is on the north side of the state. If you know Ketchum, Idaho, that's where Hemingway used to have his home. And it's near Sun Valley, also a great skiing and recreational place. But Haley has been gangbusters growing as well. And I predict it's actually going to double in size in just a very few years. Findlay, Ohio, for those of you who know Ohio, surprises some because there's not a lot there except crossroads. Well, some bright people in Findlay figured out with all the roads going through here and it being a very centrally located place in Ohio, it's a logistics center. In other words, warehousing has been going crazy here. It is really good because people can buy property here. They can set up a business here, and Findlay is really doing very well, especially for Ohio. Now, Ohio has not been on anybody's radar screen as being that fantastic, with the exception perhaps of Columbus. But Cleveland hasn't been doing that great. Findlay has potential. Number 8 is going to make a lot of people excited, Hood River. Now, in case you don't know about where Hood River is, it is, if you look at Portland and you go out to the east, about 45 minutes or so, it's right along the river, good quality of life, beautiful place. But Hood River has also gotten a lot of people with smaller manufacturing businesses that have set up there, and it's done really, really well. Now, I'm not in love with Oregon because of its taxes and some other statewide problems. However, the things going on in Hood River are showing significant growth. Breckenridge, Colorado is another one of those towns that, it's up in the mountains, by the way. It's if you look at Denver and you kind of go out to the west up in the mountains, I actually recommended against it just 3 years ago. Now, however, the amount of growth that's going on has been doing well. And you say, why? Why? It's not really close to anything. It's because of the internet. Young professionals are finding that they can go put up a nice home up into the mountains, fantastic views, great weather, lovely things to do. But it has made it so that they can have high-tech industries, even high-tech manufacturing, in a place that is not that expensive in which to live. So Breckenridge all of a sudden jumped up on the list. Much the same thing is true in Fredericksburg, Texas. Now, I will grant to you, some people will look at Fredericksburg and go, Fredericksburg, my gosh, what's there? Every one of these micropolitan locations is going to be something like that. I better keep moving on. Uvalde, Texas is another one of those. Looks like it's sprang up out of the dirt, but has done remarkably well. Vineyard Haven, Massachusetts is one of the few locations in the state of Massachusetts that is showing some genuine animal spirits as far as new competition, or I should say new employment, competitive business environments. Now, again, there's some headwinds when it comes to Massachusetts, again, because of taxes and other things. But really, if you were trying to play it safe, you'd go into Greater Boston and maybe some of the places in central Massachusetts. But really, if you want to be innovative, you have to go where the smart people are going, and Vineyard Haven is one of those locations. Glenwood Springs, Colorado, another one. It was not on anybody's radar screen for a long time, and Lewisburg, Tennessee comes up and rounds us at the top 14. Now, there are about 500 micropolitan areas, some larger, some smaller. Here's the thing. If you want to survive in this market, in an environment where you can do a startup, you pretty much have to already have a license to practice. It's not a thing that you can take another year or two to do. You just can't sit on your hands. So when it comes to these types of locations, moving quickly and making a personal commitment to the area helps. So let me just kind of say something here. What do? There are 3 things that we offer as far as helping you make a decision, and I want to make sure that we're really clear on what they are. Number 1 is a telephone consultation. Now, in reality, it's a video conference that we'll schedule with you. The reason the telephone consultation is important is because it takes almost no time to set one of these up. We can literally do it in 24 hours. If you want to get the data on a site, get a serious recommendation, and have us talk about it, telephone's the fastest way to do it. The practice viability report's going to take about a week, and the best sites reports may take 2. But that's why, if you want to move quickly, and that's what I recommend, telephone consult might be good. The practice viability report, used to be called the community overview report, is a report that deals with one site alone, one location. Now, it could be that within a microvision area, or pardon me, a micropolitan area, you're looking at the center of town and not a specific address within it. We can do that and say, now look, based upon the 5, 10, maybe even 15-minute drive time radius, is this a viable option? We can say, well, we know it's an option, but is it the right option for you? That's where the viability has to count with you. A best sites report takes into account a large geographic area and will recommend places within it. Now, the best sites report's good if you already have a license in a place, and here's why. Because by the time we're recommending it with a best sites report, you better be ready to go. So many people call us and they say, but there's no place now. Guys, that's on you. We can find the places, but you've got to be able to be moving on it. Now, here's the thing. We still have the book on sale. The Dental Practice Site Selection Handbook. You can go to dentistsiteselection.com to get there. I'm strongly going to recommend you start considering a telephone consult if you are ready to go. That's what I'm telling you. Don't play around on this. Get moving on it. You can go to our website at doctordemographics.com, dentaldemographics.com, or vetdemographics.com, and you can order those reports. The idea is you pay for it, then we schedule it through a little tool, and once you have the date, I'll then send you a link how we can do a video conference. All right, Mike, are you ready to go?
I'm here. I'm ready to go.
Any thoughts on any of the stuff I've been saying?
You said a couple things, actually. I'm just wondering how much I want to say on it before I go into mine, because I think it's really important. 2 things that really stuck out to me. One is speed. And you're so right with that, because we have a lot of doctors that are, I think they're naturally forward thinkers, right? They're always thinking, way down the road, and that's a good thing. But there are sweet spots in this country that the everything is perfect. The population is perfect. The growth is perfect. The industry is perfect. Everything, it just creates a really good environment. And the doctors will come to us and we will reveal those, either through a best sites report or practice viability. We'll say, okay, this is a great spot to go. And sometimes the challenge we have is that they wait. And like everything else in life, those that have the money and can go usually can get the deal. And that happens. Now, that does not mean that if you're a year out or 18 months out or whatever, that you shouldn't order a report. You just need to know that if you're looking in an area and that encompasses one of these that Scott talked about and 20 others, right? I mean, these aren't the only ones in the country, and we tell you that it's time. And know that if you go a year later, that, just like you said with mentioning Bozeman, right? I mean, Bozeman's not been on anybody's map for a long time, except for fly fishermen, for a really, really long time. And now, because of how things have changed, it's time. It's time. The population's there. Matter of fact, it's grown faster than the professional community has been able to keep up with it. And like 2 times ago when I talked about dentists and doctors and vets, they're lag. They're not the ones creating the jobs. They're the ones responding to the population that's going to the big employers. That's what's happening right now.
I was going to say one quick thing. I mentioned Jackson, Wyoming. For those people who know the area, that is just across the border in Idaho from Idaho Falls.
Right.
It's really very, very close. And I got to tell you, someone else is going to grab that one up if you don't. So,
yeah. And it's a beautiful place. That's the other thing. A lot of these populations, part of the reason they're so great is because they are wonderful places to live. The quality of life is
Right.
really, really high. So what I want to talk about for 10 minutes, and I'm not going to belabor this too much, but I do want to take it even a little bit further out of town and talk about true rural community marketing, because I think that that's pretty important. And a lot of doctors are finding themselves in a situation where they either want to put they want to slow down, they want to get out of the city, and so they would like to live closer to where they're wanting to practice, or they want to open satellite in one of these rural communities, because we've seen in this country a lot of rural growth over the past this last economic shift. There's been a lot of people who have been able to live further out of the city because of the rise of the internet jobs, that they can work from home. So you don't have to live in the city anymore. You can work from home, which means that I don't have to live so close to where my employer is. And so because of that, we see a lot more practices that are opening up in rural communities. So let me go through a couple things that are really important. And again, this probably warrants a much longer discussion, but these are very, very important things to note if you are thinking about opening a rural practice. Number one is, don't underestimate your marketing reach. A lot of times when we're doing a report for a rural area, we're looking at a much larger geographic scope than what we would if you were in the city. Instead of just looking at the 5, 10, and 15-minute drive time, sometimes we're looking at 45 minutes to an hour and a half, depending on where you're at. And Bozeman's a good example. Bozeman and Missoula, some of those places up in Montana, they do have a really strong population area, but there are so many small pockets of population that live 150 miles away that are used to driving into the city to do their shopping, to do their other stuff. And so they're also going to be attracted to a professional practice service provider in that case. And so don't underestimate what your population that you might be able to reach, because you can truly draw some radiuses around that address and then pull those people in, which can equal a pretty large population. The second thing is, when you're in the situation, you want to flex your Facebook ad marketing for very specific marketing techniques. And we'll talk about that here more in just a second. You have these different communities that have really subtle differences from population to population, everything from income to the psychographic nature of the communities and a lot of other things. You'll have possibly a pocket of really high income people that are what we consider top tier in income and industry and everything else. And then 20 miles in the other direction, you may have a very, very low income government subsidy type area. Now, the mistake that most practices make is they have the same marketing message to both groups. Now, if you're in a rural practice, chances are you probably need a little of both or all of both of those groups. And so it's important for you to know those subtle differences from community to community and market to them appropriately. As an example, if you go into Ohio, some of those other areas, you have deeply religious areas, you have Amish groups, you have these different communities that are built based around religion. Their dental needs are different than what you might think is a traditional dental approach, and your marketing message will also have to be that unique. And so that is why it's so important for you to do that deep dive, especially if you're opening a rural practice, to know exactly what it is that you're going to provide in the offer that you're going to create. Let's talk about offer just for a second. Keep in mind that your offer will travel as far as the group that will receive it. And so when you create an offer for, say, a lower income community and you're in a rural practice, you need to kind of take a dot or take a pin in a map and dot those. So if you're in northern Tennessee, or you're down in an area like southeastern Kentucky, you're going to be in a population center, but there are so many little nooks and crannies that you can create an offer for that is very specific, and that offer will travel so far. And it goes back to that marketing reach. You have that opportunity to bring them into your practice, and many doctors have figured that out and been extremely successful, especially since the overhead is usually pretty low. Now, the thing that you really have to be concerned with is your reputation. In these small communities, your reputation is everything. There's a lot of doctors who will have their main practice in the larger population area. Then they'll open up a practice in a smaller community, a rural area, and they won't mind the store when it comes to the reputation. What happens is they have a couple of bad interactions that goes online, and the doctor underestimates the sophistication of the people that are seeing it, they're treating in that area, and they're just essentially locked out at that point, and they can be there, but it'll die a slow death, because that reputation is extremely valuable and important in small communities. And as you know, and especially if we go back to Southeast Kentucky, these people are a lot of them. I don't mean this in a bad way. I lived in Southeast Kentucky for a while, so don't get mad at me. But a lot of them are family. Like, a lot of them are related. A lot of them are at church and at events and at these things together all the time. And so if you're not minding your reputation, you can find yourself in some pretty big trouble. The other thing is, be as local as possible. A lot of these places are used to doctors and other service providers that will blow in for a day or two a month and then be gone. And while that it was a benefit to start with, because at least they didn't have to drive into town to get that service, they will always tip their hat to somebody who is a local, who's part of the clan, who's part of the group. And so if possible, you want to appear as local as you can. You need to support the high school football team. You need to be at events. You need to do as much as you can to appear to these people that you're one of them. You need to be accepted into the tribe, and that's an important thing for rural areas. The other thing you've got to really be careful with is you've got to make sure that your expanded services doctors that you bring in. So if you're a vet and you bring in an equine chiropractor, you've got to make sure that they have the same understanding of your culture that you do, because you might have worked really hard to create a great reputation and culture within your practice, and then you have the guy from the city come in and spend a day a month, and he may destroy everything that you've worked for. So you've got to make sure that the partners that you bring in for your practice are in line and have a really strong understanding of the things that are important for you as a practice owner. The last thing is, don't make the mistake, and I said this before, of just assuming that there's no sophistication in their buying patterns in these rural communities. Like I said, a lot of very smart professionals have moved from areas like in Utah County, all the way down to Iron County in the rural areas, because they don't want to deal with the traffic. They don't want to deal with the crime. They don't want to deal with some of those areas. And so they move out to these rural areas, but these are people who are sophisticated, smart, and great business owners. And so if you underestimate that, and if you create a situation where they are not wanting to give you a good review or have a good reputation, you're going to find yourself in some trouble. If you want to get hold of me, you can do that at mike@drdemographics.com, or you can visit us obviously on always at drdemographics.com and talk about and help those telephone consults and best sites reports and practice viability reports. Scott, what say you?
I just want to say real quick, Mike, you had said that in Southern Kentucky you ought to join the Klan, and I think what you
yeah, we better clarify that.
It wasn't maybe the best use of words, generally speaking, but very good stuff. And I just want to make sure timing, everybody, is going to help you with your location. Right. That's all I say. Everybody, thank you so much. We're going to have some pretty interesting topics coming up in the next 2 or 3 weeks. You're going to want to be here for it. And thanks so much for watching.